Okay, let it out, everyone, alright? Wendigo stories again? Yeah, again, okay? So people have been requesting more Wendigo stories. They're super popular and always have been. Sue me. Am I the bad guy for listening to my fans? Perhaps. But just sit back, friends, and enjoy these new Wendigo stories I've gathered up for you. There will be a bus full of scared Boy Scouts, abusive mothers who might be more dangerous than Wendigos, and a grandmother's most terrifying story to retell. This is Unexplained Encounters. I'm Darkness Prevails, and you can send me your scary unexplained stories at darkstories.org. And you can follow and rate Unexplained Encounters on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you really love us, you can pre-order my new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or just go to creepycampfirestories.com. Thank you. Now, let's begin. What my grandchildren saw. From Anonymous. This was back in October 2016. 8 years ago now, though it feels like yesterday when I think about it. For the sake of my family's anonymity, I'll be changing the names in this story. My daughter Sharon called me on Wednesday, asked if I could watch Mason and Emma for the weekend. She and her husband Rick were going to Thunder Bay for their 15th anniversary. Of course, I said yes. I always said yes when it came to the grandkids. Mason was 11 then. Emma had just turned 8 that September. They were great kids. Mason was the quiet one, had his nose in a book whenever he could. Fantasy stuff, I think, mostly. I remember some dragons and wizards on covers. Emma was the opposite. Couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. Full of energy, that one. They loved coming over to my place because I let them do things their parents wouldn't. They stayed up a bit later, had cookies before dinner, played in the woods out back. I live about 40 minutes outside of town in northwestern Ontario. I won't say exactly where, just to be safe. My late husband Earl and I bought the property in 1978. 40 acres, backs right onto Crown land. Nothing but forest for miles and miles in every direction. We raised Sharon and her brother David here. They practically lived in those woods growing up. Never had any trouble. Well, not the kind I'm about to tell you about, anyway. The kids arrived on a Friday after school. Sharon barely got the car stopped before they were piling out. Mason lugged his backpack full of books, and Emma clutched that stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere, even though she kept insisting she was too old for her stuffed animals. "Be good for Grandma," Sharon called out, but they were already racing for the house. They knew I'd have fresh chocolate chip cookies waiting because, well, I always did. That first night was normal. We had spaghetti for dinner because that was Emma's favorite. We watched a cartoon movie about a princess. I dozed off halfway through. When I woke up, I found Mason reading by the lamp and Emma curled up against me like a little cat. I got them both tucked into the guest room by 10, which was pretty late for them, but that's what grandmas are for, right? Saturday morning was beautiful. We'd had frost overnight, and everything sparkled. You could see mist rising off the lake through the trees from my kitchen window. I was making pancakes when Emma came padding out in her pajamas, dragging her rabbit behind her. "Grandma, can we play outside after breakfast?" "Course you can, sweetheart. Just bundle up warm, it's chilly out." Mason appeared then, already dressed, with another book in his hand. That boy was probably reading while he was sleeping. After breakfast, which was pancakes with real maple syrup, a gift from our neighbors, they practically flew out the door. I watched from the window as they raced across the backyard toward the trees. We had rules, of course. Stay within shouting distance. Don't go past the big fallen oak tree. That was about a 5-minute walk into the forest. And come back in when I ring the dinner bell, which was really just me shouting. They knew all the rules. They'd been coming here since they were tiny. I puttered around the kitchen and did some dishes, starting a pot of soup for lunch. It was maybe an hour later when I heard them coming back, both of them talking excitedly. They burst through the door, pink-cheeked from the cold. "Grandma!" Emma was tugging on my sweater. There's something weird in the woods." I dried my hands on a dish towel. "What kind of weird, honey?" Mason said, "There's these marks on the trees like scratches, really high off the ground, like way higher than we can reach." "We get black bears around here all the time. The occasional grizzly passes through too. Well, that's what I've heard." I figured that's what it was. Bears scratching on trees, marking territory before winter. Nothing weird about that. "Oh, just bears, loves. You know what to do if you see one, right?" They both nodded. "Make noise, back away slowly, and don't run." We'd been over it a dozen times. But Emma wasn't satisfied with that. "It's not bear marks, Grandma. They're too high for that, even for a big bear. And they look like," she held up her hand, fingers spread wide, "like something with really, really long fingers did it." Kids and their imaginations. I gave them a snack, apple slices and cheese, and sent them back out with instructions to stay closer to the house. They agreed, but I could see they were excited now. It was an adventure for them, a new mystery to solve. They came in for lunch around noon. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, another of their favorites. They chattered the whole time about what they'd found. More scratches, all of them way up high. Places where the undergrowth was all flattened down too, like something had been walking or trampling or lying down there. Mason, always the little scientist, wanted to borrow my bird-watching binoculars to look for tracks. I let him, figuring it would keep them busy. I remember I was folding laundry when they came back the next time, around 3 in the afternoon. I knew right away something was different now. Emma wasn't bouncing. Mason wasn't talking. They stood at the back door and I could see it in their faces. Something had spooked them. "What is it now?" I asked, opening the door. Mason spoke quietly. "There's something out there, Grandma. We heard it, and I think it followed us." "It followed you? What do you mean?" Emma got close to her brother and said, "When we walked, it walked, and when we stopped, it stopped. We couldn't see it, but it stayed back in the thick trees. And it smelled weird," Mason added. "Like, remember when Dad forgot those hamburgers in the car last summer?" Rotten meat, I thought. That gave me chills. I kept calm in front of them. Didn't want to scare them worse. "Probably just a deer. They're curious sometimes. And animals die out there, you know. And they rot too, unfortunately. You may have not seen it, but you probably walked past a dead animal. Come inside, I'll make you some hot chocolate." But for the first time ever, they didn't want hot chocolate. Mason had found tracks, he said, big ones, different from anything he'd seen in nature books. Would I come look, just to the edge of the woods, please, Grandma? I should have said no. Should have kept them inside and called their parents, packed them up right then and there and drove to town. But I was still thinking bears, or even moose. Maybe just their imaginations running wild. And I didn't want to be the grandma who was scared of shadows. So I pulled on Earl's old jacket and followed them out. The tracks were by an old tree maybe 50 feet from the house. We'd had rain the week before, so the ground there was still soft. Perfect for holding in impressions. When I saw them, my mouth went dry. They weren't bear tracks. In all my years, I'd seen plenty of bear tracks. These weren't moose or deer either. What freaked me out was that they looked human. Almost human. But wrong. The foot was very long and very narrow. The toes, if you could call them toes, were stretched out, with these markings at the tips, like they were claws that had dug into the earth. But the worst of it seemed to be the stride. I'm no tracker or professional, but even I could see that whatever made these prints had very, very long legs. The distance between steps was huge. "See, Grandma?" Emma whispered. "Weird, right?" Before I could answer, we heard something. A sound from deeper in the woods. I've lived in the bush most of my life. I've heard wolves and bears and mountain cats. and it wasn't any of those. It wasn't quite a howl, wasn't quite a scream, but I swear to you it was something in between. Something that made every hair on my body stand on end. Something that reaches right into the old parts of your brain, the part that remembers when humans were prey. The kids got real close to me, and I could feel Emma trembling. "Inside," I said. My voice was sharper now. "Right now." We walked back to the house, not running, though every part of me screamed to run. Running felt dangerous, like it would trigger something to chase us. I felt us being watched. You know that feeling? When you absolutely know something is looking at you? The weight of it was like cold fingers on the back of my neck. Once inside, I locked the door. All the doors, actually. Checked every window too and drew all the curtains. The kids and I huddled up on the couch, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Mason was not reading. "Grandma, what was that?" he said in a small voice. I didn't know what to say, so I did what grandmothers do. I made dinner like nothing happened. Kept things normal for them. But while the roast was in the oven, I called my neighbor Robert. He lived only about a quarter mile down the road. I made it sound casual, just checking in, asking if he had noticed anything strange lately, any unusual animals around. "Funny you should ask," he told me. "Lost 2 chickens this week. Something tore right through the coop. Strong wire too, the good stuff. And the dogs have been going crazy at night, barking and carrying on in the forest. Won't go near the tree line after dark, though." That cold feeling in my stomach got worse. After dinner, the kids barely ate, I set them up in the living room with another movie. Told them we'd have a camp out tonight, all of us together in one room. Made it sound fun instead of, what it really was. They seemed relieved not to be sleeping alone in the guest room. I pulled out blankets and pillows and made a big nest on the floor. But I didn't sleep. Not 1 minute. I sat in Earl's old recliner, the one that faced the big picture window. I kept all the lights off inside so I could see out, and I waited. The kids fell asleep eventually. Emma first, then Mason, fighting it, but he finally gave in. I sat there listening to them breathe, watching our yard. It must have been around midnight when I saw something. I hoped it was just shadows from the trees moving, but it was a windless night. Everything was still. Then I realized the shadow was standing at the edge of where the porch light reached, standing and swaying a bit, back and forth. It was tall. So tall. I'm no good with measurements, but it had to be 7, maybe 8 feet, and disgustingly thin, like if you chewed a person up like bubblegum, spat them out, and pulled them. The thing stood there swaying. Then it took a step forward into the light. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. That thing was covered in something. Fur, maybe. Maybe it was skin. But it looked patchy, like a dog with mange. Its arms hung down past its knees, way past. And its hands were definitely like a person's. They had fingers, but were very long. I thought of those scratches on the trees, way up high, and my stomach turned. But the face, I will never forget. The eyes were sunken in real deep. They caught the light like an animal's, the way they shined. A wide, lipless mouth, just a little open, like it was tasting the air. I could see the faint glow of teeth. Too many teeth for any mouth to hold. When it began to move, it even moved unnaturally, like every one of its limbs was broken and couldn't heal. It crawled here and there and would stand back up, looking at my house, looking at the window where I sat. Could it see me in the dark there? I don't know. I hope not. I knew with absolute certainty, if my grandkids had still been outside, if they'd been in those woods after dark, they would have never come back. Maybe worse. maybe they would have come back, but wrong. I don't know how long I watched it or how long it watched me. Time went funny then. Could have been 5 minutes, maybe an hour. But eventually, the thing turned and went back into the forest. It didn't walk exactly, more like lurched, but fast, faster than something that moved like that should be able to move. I stayed in that chair until the sun came up. Didn't move an inch, and I didn't fall asleep. I waited and watched. A couple times I swear I heard something on the porch, like footsteps, but very quiet. Careful and quiet. At once I swear I heard breathing right outside the window, but I didn't look this time. I couldn't look. Just sat there praying for daylight. Soon as the sun was properly up, I got the kids up and packed. I told them I wasn't feeling very well, and I needed to take them home. They didn't argue. Actually, I think they were relieved. Kids know more than we give them credit for sometimes. On the drive to Sharon's, the longest hour of my life, Emma piped up from the back seat. "Grandma, that thing in the woods, do you think it was a Wendigo?" I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it. "Now where did you hear that?" "Mason read about it in a book. He said that it sounded like the stories." I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mason was staring out the window, but I could see his reflection. Poor kid looked older now, like he'd figured something out that a child that age never should have. "Oh, those are just stories, honey," I said finally. "Just old stories people tell." But I was lying. When we got to Sharon's, I told her the kids had gotten spooked playing in the woods. Maybe saw a bear. She laughed it off, said they both had overactive imaginations, especially Mason with all those books he reads. I let her believe that. I didn't want to say anything else. I told her that something that looked like a broken man and had too many teeth had stalked her children. I'd never see them again, and she would beg me to move away from that land. Well, funny I say that, because I sold the house the following spring. I couldn't do another night there. Couldn't stand checking the windows, jumping at every sound, wondering if some long fingers were reaching for my door handle any moment, and the idea that if I wanted to see my grandkids here, they might be stalked by this thing again. Nope, couldn't do it. I found a nice little condo in town. 2nd floor, lots of neighbors, streetlights, no trees for anything to hide behind. Before I was able to move, the kids never asked to go back to the old house. And nowadays, they don't even ask about it. We don't talk about what happened, but sometimes when Emma visits, she's 16 now, taller than me, I catch her looking out the window at the woods nearby. She'll move away from it casually, but I know she remembers. Mason's in university. It's good to see them growing up, but heartbreaking nonetheless. Robert, my old neighbor, called me about a year after I moved, wanted to know if I'd had any trouble at my place. He said something had gotten into his barn, killing 3 goats. Whatever it was didn't even eat them, just killed them and left them laid out in a row. And his grandson, visiting for the summer, kept saying he saw a tall man in the woods, watching the house. I was going fishing. From F. Teller. This all started in May of 2023. Fishing is my hobby, and I usually fish late, after work. I get to the local lake around 7 and fish until midnight or so. The walleye bite better at dusk and after dark anyway. I've got myself a 16-foot aluminum boat. Nothing crazy, just a 25-horse Mercury and a fish finder. One night in May, I was anchored up in my usual spot, near the North Shore. There's a weed bed there that drops off into about 20 feet of water. Walleye cruised the edge right at sunset. I was watching my rod tip, waiting for that telltale tap-tap, when I saw some movement on the shore. The way the sun was setting, the trees were mostly silhouettes, but I could see something moving between them for sure. Deer, probably. Lots of deer up there. But that little voice in the back of my head was saying that deer don't move like that. Looked like someone was crawling. Have you ever seen someone do that military crawl under barbed wire? It really reminded me of that, but faster than a soldier. It moved along the shoreline for maybe 30 yards, then stopped. I couldn't make out much in the fading light, but I think it was watching me. The thing stopped and turned toward the water, toward me. And I had this feeling that made the hair on my arms stand up. And just like that, it was gone, back into the deeper woods. The whole thing lasted maybe 20 seconds. I stayed out another hour, caught 2 nice walleye, but I kept looking at that spot on the shore. Nothing else happened. When I got home, I figured it was either one of 2 things: a couple raccoon moving in sync, or someone camping and being drunk. Some weirdo crawling around. That lake in particular gets the occasional camper, but not that many. Next week, same spot, same time. I wasn't even thinking about what happened last time, not until I anchored up. Everything was normal for the first hour. I caught a small pike and released it. Around 9:30, still some light in the sky, I saw it again. This time it was further down the shore, about 50 yards from where I saw it before. Same crawling movement, but I got a better look. It certainly looked like a man, but something was ringing alarm bells about it. Might have been the way it reminded me of reeling in a fish, the way it might struggle when it hits land before you lift it up. A stop-start motion, but still covering ground fast, like it would freeze for a second, then go forward, then freeze again. I grabbed my phone, not actually thinking about taking a picture, but rather thinking about using the camera to zoom in to see if I could see what it was. But by the time I lifted my phone up, the thing was gone. But I noticed something new then. The birds had gone quiet. If you spend enough time outdoors, you know that kind of quiet. The way everything stops making any noise when something dangerous might be about. I pulled anchor and moved to the other side of the lake that night. I didn't catch anything else. The third time was 2 weeks later. I'd been busy with work, missed a week. Almost didn't go that night because it was overcast. Looked like rain. But the forecast said the storms would hold off until after midnight. So I took the risk. I tried a different spot, on the eastern shore. There's a little bay there with a creek running in. Good spot for pike. I'd been there maybe an hour when I began to hear splashing from the creek mouth. Not like a beaver, but more like a person treading through water. Something was wading down the creek toward the lake. I turned on my headlamp and aimed it at the creek. The splashing sound stopped immediately. Dead silence. I kept the light on the creek mouth for maybe a full minute. Nothing. Then, just at the edge of the light, I saw eyes reflecting back. Height of a person, a bit taller than that actually, but the eyes were too far apart. And when they blinked, I swear they blinked sideways. What, like a bird's or maybe a snake's eyes or something? Surely there's a reptile that does that. I started my motor and got out of there. I didn't pull my lines in first either. Just cut them. Lost 2 good rigs, but I didn't care at the moment. The smart thing would have been to find a new lake. Plenty of good fishing spots up here. But this lake was my spot. I'd been fishing it for so long, couple decades at least. Some malnourished hermit wasn't going to chase me off. That's what I told myself anyway. So I kept going back. I started bringing a spotlight though. One of those handheld ones that plugs into the boat battery. Million candle power. And I started to pay more attention, keeping notes even. What time I saw it, where it would be, what I was doing, what it was doing. June 15th. Saw it on the west shore around 10 p.m. Walking upright this time, along the tree line. Looked like it was dragging something but couldn't tell what. June 22nd. Nothing seen, but I heard wood knocking sounds from the north shore. Kinda like a woodpecker. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Lasted about 10 minutes. July 4th, holiday weekend. Lake was busier than usual. 3 other boats out. Didn't see anything, but one of the other fishermen pulled up to me around 11. Asked if I'd seen that tall guy on the shore. He said he'd been watching their boat from the trees, and they were leaving. July 18th. Hot night, dead calm. Fish weren't biting. Around 11:30, something swam past my boat, and I swear it wasn't no beaver or otter. Too big. Made a wake, like when you're trolling with a big, deep-diving crankbait. That V-shaped disturbance with nothing visible on the surface. It went toward the north shore. Then I heard it come out of the water. Heavy slapping sounds, like wet canvas hitting rocks. Then nothing. By August, I was seeing it almost every time I went out. Sometimes crawling, sometimes walking. Once I saw it climbing a tree. It went up a big pine like a mud puppy goes up a dock post, using its whole body, undulating. Must have gone 40 feet up in less than a minute. It stayed up there the whole time I fished. Just a dark shape against the tree trunk. Gave me real bad vibes. The smell started in September. Smelled like bait shrimp in your tackle box for a week in July. But it wasn't consistent. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff when the wind shifted. Sometimes it was so strong I'd gag. Always seemed to come from different directions. Maybe it was circling the lake. Circling me. September 20th. That was when things got bad. Real bad. I'd gone out later than usual. Didn't get on the water until almost 9. The fall walleye bite had been good, and I wanted to fill my freezer for winter. I anchored up in my usual spot on the north shore. It was darker than normal, new moon and overcast. I could barely see the shoreline, even with my eyes adjusted. Around 10:30, I heard branches breaking on the shore. Not small branches, big ones. Crack, 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 getting closer to the water. I hit my spotlight, and I swept it over the tree line. There it was. I found it standing right at the water's edge, full view, no more than 30 yards from my boat. This was the first time I really saw it shift. It's hard to explain, but the way its skin moved, it was like there was something underneath it trying to get comfortable. It didn't run when the light hit it. It just stood there. Then it took a step into the water. I yanked my anchor so hard I nearly flipped out the boat. I got the motor started on the 3rd pull. It was waist deep by then, and still coming. I gunned it out toward the middle of the lake. When I looked back, it was standing in the shallows watching me. Then it turned and walked back to shore. But it didn't go back into the woods. It started to walk along the shore, matching my direction. I needed to get to the boat launch, which meant following the shore around to the south end of the lake. 3 miles of shoreline, and that thing was following me. I stayed as far from shore as I could, but that lake isn't that big. I could see it moving in the trees, keeping up with me. Sometimes it would come out onto rocky points standing in full view. It wasn't even trying to hide anymore. About halfway to the launch, it somehow got ahead of me. I don't know how. I was maybe doing 20 miles per hour. And it just appeared further down the shore. It was like it knew where I was going. It walked out onto a fallen tree that extended into the water, and it sat down on the end of it, waiting for me. I stopped the boat. I was maybe 100 yards away from it, and it just sat there on that log. Those arms with too many bends, folded up like a grasshopper's legs. I saw its silhouette tilt its head at me. Then it slipped off the log and got into the water. I've never run a boat motor that hard. I thought for sure I was going to blow it up. I could see the wake of something behind me in the moonlight, but I couldn't see where it was. I kept that throttle wide open and headed for the launch. When I got there, I didn't even tie the boat off properly. Just ran it up on the shore, grabbed my keys, and ran for my truck. I could hear something coming through the water behind me, Not swimming. It was more like it was running through the shallows. And fast. I made it to my truck, locked those doors, and peeled out. In my rear-view mirror, lit up by taillights, I saw it standing in the middle of the access road. Just standing there, watching, looking almost disappointed. I went back the next morning with 2 buddies to get my boat. I told them I'd had engine trouble and had to leave it in a hurry. They helped me to load it up. One of the guys pointed out some tracks in the mud nearby, where I'd beached the boat. They looked like prints from bare feet. I didn't say anything about it. Haven't been back to that lake since. Don't even fish much anymore anywhere. I tried a few other spots, but I can't shake that feeling. To be honest, I think that thing has me afraid of the dark. My wife thinks I'm crazy for giving up fishing. Says I'm letting one bad night ruin everything I love. She's right. But then again, she wasn't there. Didn't see it slip into the water like that. Didn't hear it running through the shallows right behind her. The Boyscouts Incident. From Anonymous. This happened in 2009 when I was 13. I was in the Boy Scouts. We were coming back from a regional jamboree in Wisconsin, one of those big weekend things with troops from 3 states. We had fun camping competitions, knot tying and fire building and all that stuff. Our troop had done pretty well, I think. Got 2nd place in orienteering, which was pretty big for us. There were 17 of us on that bus, plus Mr. H, who was driving, and Assistant Scoutmaster J riding shotgun. It was one of those short yellow school buses, the kind churches and scout troops buy secondhand. Ours was a 1994 piece of junk that smelled like old vinyl and diesel exhaust. But it was ours. The drive back was supposed to take about 4 hours. We'd left the jamboree grounds around 6 in the evening, planning to get home by 10. Most of the younger kids had already crashed out, exhausted from the long weekend. I was in the back with my buddy T and a few other guys, playing cards by the dome light. Around 8:30, Mr. H pulled off at a rest stop. It wasn't a big interstate one. It was on Highway 53, I think, just a little parking area with picnic tables and outhouses. He said he needed to stretch his legs and we could use the facilities if we needed. About half of us piled out to use the bathrooms, move around, or act up. It was getting dark. The rest stop was surrounded by woods on 3 sides, with just the highway on the 4th. There was a street light by the bathrooms, one of those orange sodium lights that make everything look weird. A few moths were already circling it. I remember one of the younger kids, I'll just call him Tyler, don't want to call 2 people T in this story. He was maybe 11 years old. He was pointing at the woods and saying something was moving around in there. We older scouts gave him heck about it. "Oh, scary woods, Tyler, maybe it's a squirrel," that kind of thing. Just poking fun. We all loaded back up after about 10 minutes. Mr. H did a head count. Jay double-checked, then we pulled out. Made it maybe 2 miles down the road when the engine started to cough. Then it died completely. Mr. H was able to coast us onto the shoulder, thankfully. He tried to start it a few times then. We heard this grinding sound where it wants to turn over, but just won't. Jay got out with a flashlight to look under the hood, while Mr. H called the Scout Council's emergency number on his flip phone. This was 2009, remember. A lot of folks didn't have smartphones yet. We were stuck there for maybe 20 minutes. The kids were starting to get restless. T and I had given up on cards as it was getting too dark, even with the dome lights on. That's when Tyler, the same kid from the rest stop, pressed his face against the window and goes, "There's somebody out there." At first, nobody paid attention to him. But then M, sitting across from Tyler, looked out too. Holy crap, there is somebody. That got everybody looking. The bus was parked with the woods on the right side, about 15 feet from the trees. And sure enough, just inside that first row, something pale was moving around. Jay was still up front with the hood open. Mr. H was on the phone, pacing around. They couldn't see what we were looking at from their angle. "It's just deer," someone said. But it looked like it was sneaking. Deer don't sneak, do they? I mean, they move real slow, but they're not trying to sneak up on you. That's a different kind of movement altogether. And this thing was so pale it was white. Even in the dim light, you could see it was white. And not white fur, but skin white. It then began to come out of the trees a little. Just enough for us to see it was human-shaped, but nude. Completely naked, crawling on hands and feet, back arched up high and head hanging down. It was like when you see those circus performers who bend backwards and walk on their hands and feet. But this was forward, not backward. Sorry, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but it was goddamn terrifying. "What the heck?" T whispered. It stopped maybe 10 feet from the bus. Just froze there. We could see it better now in the spillover from the bus's parking lights. It looked like a dude, but something was wrong with him, like he hadn't eaten in years. I could see every detail of his spine and shoulder blades, enough to gross me out. The guy lifted his head at us and looked at the bus. And I think it was then that I realized the term guy did not describe this. I don't think it was human. It had super deep eyes and a very narrow jaw, with an expression that was completely blank, like not a thought was going through its head, or maybe every thought, like it was calculating but never feeling. Half the bus started screaming at once. Mr. H came running back in, Jay right behind him. "What's going on in here? What's the problem?" "There's a naked guy outside," someone shouted. Mr. H looked where we were pointing. The thing, the person, quote unquote, whatever, had lowered its head again, but hadn't moved otherwise. Just stayed there in that weird crouch position. "Oh, Christ," Mr. H muttered. Then he got loud again. "Okay, everyone, calm down, stay in your seats. Jay, call 911. Jay was already way ahead of him. He had the phone out, and I heard him telling dispatch there was a naked individual acting erratically near our broken-down bus. I remember him saying something about looking like the dude was on drugs. The thing started to move again, not towards us. It crawled parallel to the bus, heading towards the front. The way it moved made me feel gross. It was fluid, and yet bug-like. When it got alongside Mr. H, who was standing by the door, it stopped again, raised up slightly, still on all fours, and made a sound. I have thought about that sound a lot over the years. The kind of sound that comes back when you're trying not to think about it, makes you look over your shoulder a few times before turning on all the lights. Imagine a man moaning his death moan, but also a sick and elderly man trying to clear mucus out of his throat, but deeper and real wet. And it went on way too long. 15 seconds, I'd say, without stopping for a breath. Mr. H backed up against the bus door. "Sir, you need help. The police are coming, just stay there." It tilted its head at him, too far, like an owl, but worse, because it was on what looked like a human neck. Then it smiled. Not a normal smile either, more like a dog snarling, and humans on TikTok just call it a smile. That's when Jay decided to take action. He had one of those big mag lights, the kind that doubles as a club if you need it to. He stepped in between that thing and Mr. H, flashlight raised. "Back off, man, I mean it," he said. The thing looked at Jay. Then, fast as anything, it scurried backward, not turning around, just reversing direction while still facing us. It went about 20 feet, then sat. Actually sat like a person would, but in the middle of the road, naked and pale, just sitting there staring at a busload of kids. The younger kids were crying now. A couple of the older ones too, I admit. I wasn't crying though, but I wanted to. The way it moved and the way it looked. It makes your brain try to recategorize it as human, but it kept being wrong in enough ways that added up to something horrible. We could hear sirens in the distance. The thing heard them too, and it stood up, normal standing on 2 legs. And that was almost worse, because she could see how wrong it really looked trying to be a person. It looked at the bus one more time, then it dropped back to all 4s and scuttled into the woods like a spider. Looked more like a sped-up video. The cops showed up maybe 2 minutes later. 2 cruisers. They took statements from Mr. H and J, shining their spotlights around the woods. One of them found its trail in the dirt. Swear I heard the word unusual between 2 of the cops. The official story we got was that we'd encountered a drug user. Probably meth. Someone exhibiting extreme behavior, and obviously potentially dangerous. I was close enough to hear one cop tell another, real quiet-like, about extra marks on footprints he couldn't account for. But the other cop told him to just write it up as bare footprints and leave it at that. They got us towed to a gas station about 10 miles up the road. We had to wait 3 hours for a replacement bus from the council. The whole time, us scouts were comparing notes on what we'd seen. The younger kids kept saying it didn't look like a regular person. Tyler was insistent that the hands were just not right. They had too many knuckles, he said. M said that the skin looked loose, like it didn't even fit it. Mr. H and J kept telling us it was just some druggie. Someone methed up out of their mind. They sat us down and explained that drugs can do crazy things to people, make them act worse than animals. But I could tell they were shaken up too, especially Jay. He kept rubbing his neck, looking out the windows. On the replacement bus, nobody wanted to sit on the right side. Everyone crowded onto the left, away from where the woods would be. We made it home without any more incidents, but the damage had been done. 3 kids quit scouts after that trip. Their parents said they were way too traumatized. Tyler had nightmares for months. His mom called Mr. H about it. And at a certain point, the rest of the troop was no longer allowed to talk about it. We'd get in trouble if we did. It became a sort of hush-hush legend. All these years later, having seen actual drug addicts and people having mental health crises, all kinds of crazy crap, I can tell you with absolute certainty that that is not what we saw that night. Drugs don't change your skeleton. Mental illness doesn't add extra joints where there shouldn't be joints. And they don't make people able to move in ways humans can't move. The monster I saw was nowhere near as bad as my own mother. From Blake W. The year was 1994. I was 14 years old living in a piece of crap rental house just outside Ely, Minnesota. It was me and my mom. Dad had been gone since I was 8. Not that he was much better when he was around, though. Our house sat on 5 acres of nothing really. There was woods all around except for the dirt road out front. The closest neighbor we had was half a mile away. Our place was falling apart. The siding was coming loose, the foundation was cracked, windows didn't shut right. But the rent was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask questions, which was perfect for my mom. You see, my mom drank. Not like a glass of wine with dinner drank. More like a bottle of vodka before noon drinking. She waitressed at a truck stop when she could keep a job, which wasn't often. When she was working, I'd sometimes eat, and when she wasn't, well, I learned to make a can of soup last 3 days. The hitting wasn't the worst part. When she was really lit, she would take swings at me. Leave black eyes, bruised ribs, but that was maybe once a month. But the neglect was constant. She would forget I existed until she needed something. Then I was suddenly the most important person in the world, until whatever she needed was done. The TV was her lifeline. We had this ancient Zenith. Must have been from the 70s, I'd say. Wood grain panels on the sides weighed about 1,000 pounds. It got maybe 5 channels through the antenna on the roof on a good day. CBS came in clear usually. ABC and NBC were fuzzy. PBS if the weather was right. Fox was just static with occasional glimpses of The Simpsons. Mom had her shows. Jeopardy around 7 or so. Some soap opera reruns after that. Then the late-night talk shows. If she missed her shows because the antenna was acting up, that was my fault. Everything was my fault when she was drinking. But the TV especially. One night it had been really windy all day. Not just breezy, but the kind of wind that makes the whole house creak. Trees would bend sideways, and I'd been watching the antenna through my bedroom window, seeing it twist each gust. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, around 6:45 p.m., right before she had to have her Jeopardy, the picture went to snow. I heard her screaming from the living room before I could even get downstairs. "You worthless little turd, what did you do?" "Nothing, Mom, it's the wind." She threw a glass at me, missed, luckily, and hit the wall. Vodka and orange juice dripped down the fake wood paneling. "Get up there and fix it! Now!" "Mom, it's really windy out there. Maybe we should wait." That's when she hit me. An open hand across the face. But she was wearing rings, split my lip pretty good. "I said now!" So I went. I got the ladder from the shed, the rusty piece of crap that was missing the 3rd rung. I dragged it around to the side of the house. The wind was worse than I'd thought, kept trying to rip the ladder out of my hands. Our roof was steep, like dangerously steep, and the shingles were old, lots of them loose or missing. The antenna was mounted at the peak. A good climb up. On a calm day, it would be a sketchy climb, but on a night like this, it was insane. But I climbed. What else was I gonna do? The wind hit different up there. At ground level, it came in gusts, but on the roof, it was constant, pushing and pulling from every direction. I had to basically crawl, fingers digging into whatever gaps I could find between shingles. The antenna was bent sideways, barely hanging on by one bracket. I could see why the signal had gone out. I had some wire and pliers in my pocket, from the shed. This wasn't my first time up here. I started to work on straightening it out, trying not to think about how one good gust would send me sliding off into the dark, when I noticed a really awful smell. Not sure if it cut through the wind or was carried by it. Smelled like roadkill dug out of a deep sewage pipe. It was so bad and sudden that it made my eyes water. Even so, I got the antenna mostly straight. I started to wrap some wire around the base to secure it better. The wind died down for a second, and in that quiet, brief moment, I heard breathing. Not mine, but something else's. This deep breathing from somewhere below. I crawled over and looked down at the yard. We had one of those security lights on the shed, the kind that's supposed to come on with motion, but it only worked about half the time. But it was on now, and something was standing at the edge of that light. The first word in my brain was, "Is that a moose? Do we have moose out here?" It resembled a deer more, but deer don't get that big. They don't stand that tall either. Deer don't have arms. This wasn't a moose or a deer. It was tall, maybe 6 or 7 feet, and hunched forward like it was looking at something on the ground. And its head was the shape of a deer's, but covered in a mess of fur and antlers. These antlers weren't symmetrical. One side had too many points branching off in different directions that hurt to look at. The other side was broken and jagged. I couldn't tell if it was covered in fur or had fur. It looked loose yet natural at the same time. It was hard to tell in the bad light. Then it lifted its head, and what I saw was no face, but a deer's skull, pointed right at me. But those eyes weren't empty sockets, like a dead deer skull's would be. There was something in there, beady and red, reflecting like an animal who got caught in a photo. But maybe it wasn't a reflection. Maybe they were glowing, just a little. I stopped moving entirely. I was scared, yeah, but I had this feeling like my teacher had just called on me and I'd forgotten my homework. My brain just sort of stopped working. It then took a step towards me. Towards the house. The breathing got louder, not faster, but louder. Then I heard something. Its mouth didn't move. I don't think that skull jaw even moved, but a voice came from somewhere else. Maybe it was inside my head, maybe from the wind, but I swear I heard the words, "Come down." 2 words, that's it. But the voice was like sandpaper and water and static all at once. It made my teeth hurt. I shook my head. I couldn't say a word, could barely even breathe at that moment. It tilted that skull head and took another step. Now it was at the base of the ladder. "Come down, boy." The ladder shook, not from the wind this time. It was pulling on it, like it was testing it. One of those wrong, claw-like hands wrapped around a rung. I crawled backward, away from the edge, nearly lost my grip and had to catch myself on the antenna. It bent again, but I didn't care. Mom could deal with the fuzzy TV for now. That thing, I didn't have a word for it yet, started to climb. Have you ever seen something that your brain just refuses to process? Like when you're looking at an optical illusion and you can see both images at once. That's what watching this thing climb was like. The antlers kept scraping against the ladder, making that sound of metal against bone. It was the most haunting sound I'd ever heard. Still is. I kept backing up until I hit the peak of the roof. There was nowhere else to go. That thing was halfway up now, the skull face tilted up at me. In the security light, I could see more details I didn't want to see. The skull was not clean. There were strips of something hanging off of it. Skin or maybe meat. And the antlers weren't just broken, they were growing. New, fresh, budding points were splitting through the bone. It suddenly stopped. It just stayed there on the ladder and watched me. I heard it laughing, and when it was done, I heard the voice again. It said, "No one will look for you. No one will notice." I hate that what I heard was right. Mom was probably passed out by now, completely forgot about the TV. I could stay up here all night, and she would never even check. I could fall off and break my neck, and she might not even notice for a few days when the smell got bad. The thing knew it too. I could see it in those red eyes. It understood exactly what kind of house this was, what kind of mother was inside, what kind of kid ended up on roofs in windstorms, because the alternative was worse. But that's when I found my voice, finally. "No." The voice returned. "I will wait." And it did. It climbed back down and stood at the bottom of my ladder. I tried yelling out for my mom, but I'm not sure if I could be heard over the wind. And even if she could hear, I doubt she would have come. I heard the thing laugh again, mocking me. Hours passed. I know because I could see Mom's bedroom light go on around 11, then off again at midnight. Her routine, that thing down there never moved, except to occasionally look at me. Sometimes it would speak, random things like getting cold or long way down, or she hits you and I saw. That last one made me flinch. It saw. It made that laugh again. My hands went numb first, then my feet. October in Minnesota isn't warm, and the wind made it worse. I thought about trying to get to the other side of the roof, maybe drop down and make a run for the house. But every time I moved, the thing would move too, repositioning itself. And it was faster than me. We both knew that. Around 3 in the morning, something changed. The thing looked up at the sky, then back to me. I swear it nodded. And then it backed away from the ladder, into the darkness beyond the security light. I could still see red eyes for longer than I should have been able to, floating in the black like cigarette embers. I waited until the sun was fully up before I dared to climb down. My hands were so stiff I could barely grip the rungs. I nearly fell twice. When I finally made it inside, Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. "Where were you?" she asked. Didn't even look at me. I didn't answer. I just went to my room and laid down, still in my jacket and shoes, shaking. Not from cold anymore. She never asked why I'd been gone all night. Never noticed the blood on my lip from where she'd hit me. Never noticed anything. But I noticed things after that. Noticed how sometimes the deer in our yard stood too long in one place. Catch glimpses of twisted or broken antlers in the trees for a moment. Because I think it was still out there. It didn't come back in the yard again, but it was there, always just out of sight. It was waiting for something. I left home when I was 17. I joined the army the day after graduation just to get away. From Mom, from the house, from whatever that thing was. I've been gone 25 years now. Mom died 10 years ago. Drank herself to death, surprising no one. I didn't attend her funeral. And I'll never be going back home. You'd have to drag me there, or kill me first. Well, that last story was something, huh? If there's one thing worse than a Wendigo, it's that kid's mom. But at least there was a, happy ending, I guess. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unexplained Encounters. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can find me on Twitter at DarkPrevails. The clock is ticking down to pre-order my new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or creepycampfirestories.com. It releases next month. Just a few weeks, actually. If you're one of the first 1,000 to order, you'll get a sick new bookmark that I forgot to show in my previous YouTube video, but we'll all forgive me for that, right? Right? Be sure to follow and review Unexplained Encounters on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to help us grow. And as always, you can send us your scary stories of the unexplained at darkstories.org. Thank you. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy. Because this world is a strange one.